Are these bowls actually containing soup? And if they are, how do we know it's progressive soup? I mean, there's got to be a show out there that somebody puts on, maybe our friend Marty Heiser does, called Regressive Soup. So, no, this is Progressive Soup. I am David Stevenson. We're back talking about the subject we've been on for 7 or 8 months now, about the Democratic primaries. We've got our good friend Joe Niola with us, who's been keeping us up to date on the comings and goings of our particular candidate, Bernie Sanders. And we also have an impartial observer in this. And Luther Weeks is the head of the Connecticut
Citizen Election
Audit. He is stainlessly impartial when it comes to elections because that's his job, and he shall remain so during our discussion. Joe and I will not be. We are partial. We are partial to Bernie Sanders. And Joe, start us off. What is going on with the Democratic Party primaries?
Well, I guess the question is, where are we now? Well, we are still in the race. There was a push, and it was very apparent in the media, and probably, most likely, prompted by the Clinton campaign to get Bernie Sanders to concede. The fact of the matter is Bernie Sanders is not a stooge of the Democratic Party. All right? Bernie Sanders happens to be a legitimate candidate of the people. He always was, and he still is. Now, that particular push failed, and therefore the Clinton campaign and the media that tends to support the whole Clinton machine decided that maybe it would be best to cover Bernie's activities in a very minimal fashion. And the reason for this is because Hillary felt that she was at a disadvantage, that she had to fight a battle on two fronts. Mm-hmm. She had to fight for the primary, the Democratic primary, and at the same time, she had to confront the presumptive Republican candidate, Donald Trump. She moaned and groaned about this, but all that moaning and groaning is really something not worth considering in light of the fact that Bernie started off with the challenge of not having the same name recognition, not being able to be in the forefront of an election as she's been since she's been campaigning for years now, and also because Bernie did not cow down to the big money. Mm-hmm. So not only does Hillary have all these advantages, including being the privileged candidate and having the media behind her, but also having all the money, the big pharma money, the Wall Street money, a lot of the corporate money, big oil money. I mean, she is in a much financial, her financial position appears to be a lot stronger, mm-hmm. And she has quite a bit of the money sources behind her. And as far as her moaning and groaning over having to fight on two fronts, I think that's just too bad. And I think that most of the Bernie Sanders campaign people and the Bernie Sanders campaign supporters feel that, that is just a little too bad. And Bernie Sanders has no desire to concede right now. His purpose was to take the fight right to the convention, mm-hmm. and that's most probably what he's going to do.
There's been a lot of talk all along the way of something to the effect that a candidate has a convention, not a convention, but a primary fight, and then they pivot to the general election. What in the world does that mean, to pivot toward the general election? Luther, what does that mean?
Well, I think, and first let me clarify something. I mean,
Yeah.
I do vote in the elections. I'm a member of a particular party.
Yeah.
But today, I focus on election integrity, so I keep quieter about, what particular candidate I support.
Maybe you could do a little fact checking for us and correct us if you think anything might be not exactly right. But what does it mean by pivoting toward how do candidates pivot toward the general election?
Well, I guess, in a good way, it would be to focus on different candidates that they're running against in a general election rather than a primary. They're not distinguishing themselves from, a candidate in their same party, but from another party.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I think in the bad way maybe is if they start saying things differently, saying different things, let's say, about the same things. If a candidate, let's say a Democratic candidate, moves to the right when they become, run against a Republican, and if a Republican candidate suddenly starts softening some of their hardline right issues, I think that makes the public a little suspicious of what's going on here.
Isn't that kind of what we're hearing from the Republican Party telling Donald Trump that, hey, maybe you need to stop saying horrible things about Latinos or Hispanics, and maybe you need to soften things a little bit because, hey, we're going to need to win some of those votes. So would you please, when it comes to that, could you please shut up a little bit? Maybe that's what they're, on the Republican side, maybe that's what they mean by pivoting toward the general election, to try to talk more to independent voters, maybe.
Yeah, and that's the theory that seems to get tried on both sides.
Yeah.
The theory of not changing your position hasn't been tested so much.
Okay. I'll say this again, and I'm going to be partisan. Hillary Clinton has changed her position on a lot of issues during these primaries. She has come a long way off of her original positions on a couple of very important, well, I can name two off the top of my head that are very important issues. Trans-Pacific Partnership, the latest and they say the latest and greatest of all the free trade agreements, but they all stink. Again, that's my opinion. But she helped write that Trans-Pacific Partnership. She helped write that and was very much in favor of it. And when polling showed that Bernie Sanders' position on that was more favorable to the Democratic primary voter, she changed. And now she's not exactly 100% against the TPP bill that she helped craft, but she certainly is talking about it in a much more critical light than she once did.
Well, Bernie Sanders is right when he calls her out on issues of judgment. There are two aspects to a politician's experience. One of them has to do with experience, and the other one has to do with judgment. And there's a number of situations where Bernie's judgment was definitely shown to be the accurate or the best course of action. And so because of her failure in judgment, she has to somehow or other try to reposition herself. But that's all part of the political game. It's the Republican Party situation that really smells of stupidity and hypocrisy. You get characters like Trump and Rubio and Cruz and Christie going against each other, actually attacking each other personally, failing to even stay on the issues, and then in the interest of the party, okay, it's important now for them to support the presumptive candidate. All right, it's always in the interest of the party. Whereas in the case of Bernie Sanders, that's not his primary concern. His primary concern has to do with the interest of the people and his constituency and his supporters. All right, it's not easy for him to do the turnaround or the bow face or to concede. It's not part of what he is made of. This creates a problem. The big problem. Oh my God, the country will be in the hands of a Republican Congress. The country will be in the hands of a Republican presidency. The courts, okay, will have a conservative agenda. These are all big fears. But who has to make the move in order to prevent this this grotesque scenario? Does it have to be Bernie Sanders, who has a large constituency of supporters that will not only that will support him, or is it the responsibility of the superdelegates and the Democratic Party at a convention, okay, to realize that in the best interests of the Democratic Party and in the best interest of the country, perhaps they should take a look at Bernie Sanders and see him, all right, as the nominee of the Democratic Party. Does this make sense to you?
Absolutely. And between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, and as much has been made of the fact that Clinton's been a Democrat for a long time, at least ever since she was a Goldwater girl. She's been a Democrat for decades, and Bernie Sanders has been a Democratic socialist, if you will. So not in the Democratic Party in crowd.
An independent.
Of the two of them, which one really reflects Democratic Party values? And when I say Democratic Party values, I mean, you know, we remember Franklin Roosevelt, the New Deal, the things that made the Democratic Party great for many, many, many decades. Which candidate?
Well, here David, that's it. Now, what is the Democratic Party? Is it the established money party? All right. Is it pretty much what Wall Street, the big banks, what Big Pharma, what all the big money wants it to be? Or is it truly the liberal, progressive party that has its roots in the programs of Franklin D. Roosevelt, of Lyndon B. Johnson? Okay, it's up to the actually it's in the hands of the American people.
Yeah,
they have to kind of stick to their guns now. The Democratic Party feels that Bernie Sanders needs to concede, and not only does he need to concede, he needs to bring his supporters into the Hillary camp. No! If Hillary wants those supporters in her camp, she has to go out and get them. If she can't get them, then the Democratic Party has to do some serious reflecting. Why? Because the polls show that the race between a Hillary Clinton candidacy and a Donald Trump candidacy would be very, very close. So much so that if she won, it might be by a very slight margin. And when you have a situation like that, she could lose. Whereas the polls indicate that an election involving Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders, Sanders wins.
hands down.
Hands down. So, okay, Democratic Party, wise up. Don't expect that Bernie Sanders is going to pull the same nicety nice that Cruz did, that Christie did, that Rubio did. And even Paul Ryan, you know, another pawn of the Republican Party. Paul Ryan is intelligent enough to know, okay, how damaging a Trump candidacy could be to the Republican Party.
In what way? How could it hurt the Republican Party?
The Republican Party has the so-called conservative agenda. Okay, it's all mapped out.
Yeah.
Okay, it's been approved by the Koch brothers, etc.
Yep.
And someone like Donald Trump, he's sort of like a loose cannon. He could, on a whim, decide that some aspect of that agenda could be blown off. This is not something that the conservative established Republican Party wants to have to deal with. So much so that some of that Koch money isn't even going into any kind of a presidential election. They just as soon buy the Congress and keep it bought, just in case Hillary gets in, and then they can create their own obstructionist agenda, and we would have another 4 years of what Barack Obama had to deal with. So, you know, there's the scenario on that side of the fence.
Again, I'm going to throw you the hot potato again. Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders. Which candidate best reflects Democratic Party values?
All right. Okay.
Okay, come on.
I can answer that question.
Thank you.
But then again, I have to rhetorically say, what are the values of the Democratic Party right now?
That's a very good counter, and we really don't know.
Okay, we know what the values of the Democratic Party should be, and as far as I'm concerned, it's the values that and the issues and the concerns that have been purported for weeks by Bernie Sanders. Okay? And every time these are brought to the attention of the American people, it seems as though Hillary Clinton and her machine and the media attempt to marginalize them. Why? Why would they do that? Why? Because it's the establishment view of what the agenda of the Democratic Party should be. That is what they want to keep in effect, because that's where they financially benefit.
Okay. Now we've been hearing in all the media the talking heads, at least as far back as Michigan, where Linda Tran, whose company, she's not a Clinton, she doesn't work for the Clintons or for Hillary Clinton, but her company that she co-founded does. So they gave a little bit of heads up that, oh, by the way, she has sort of a second-hand connection to the Clinton campaign. They sat there and they're counting the votes in Michigan and determining. It was a close race. The polls had Sanders down 10%, and all of a sudden here on election night in Michigan, Sanders is ahead, and lo and behold, stayed ahead in Michigan. And Linda Tran says, I don't know why we're even here counting these votes and following this because Clinton's way ahead. Doesn't make any difference. This is over. And this is back in March. So as far back as then, all the talking heads have basically said, it's over, nothing here, folks, nothing to do, waste your time, don't worry about it, this is your candidate. They've been doing this.
And the people are being exposed to that kind of propaganda, and they'll buy into it, and especially now that Sanders is getting so... Well, what's happening is there are other forms of communication.
Yes.
A lot of the young people aren't as tuned in to the networks. They're getting a lot of their information online. And it is absolutely amazing what kind of information you can get from sources that appreciate the Sanders message. The Young Turks, very, very popular among the millennials. And also, another thing about these polls, take the California situation right now. They say it's really close. Well, it's not so close. The polls, they can't pick up on all the cell phone people. All right, they're not contacting them. All right, when they say it's really close, that means once those young people that haven't been contacted by polling companies And once the independents who are able to vote now
Yep.
in California in the Democratic primary, once they start to mobilize, I would say that the Hillary camp is going to have quite a fight on their hands.
Well, Nate Silver, 538 is his polling prognosticating company. He's pretty good. He was extremely efficient talking about sports, and he gravitated to the political realm. He's been off in every caucus primary by an average of 5%. He's had Sanders down 5% more on average than what the actual election ended up being. So here's a guy that's still trying to figure out what's going on and why he keeps getting these why his polling is off. And I think a lot of it, like you say, has to do with independence. I think young people perhaps are more not just more tuned into alternate media, but more advertising resistant.
Not only that,
than older folks are.
They're not as party affiliated as our generation.
Yeah.
We tend to identify with either the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. They're not that attuned. They will look at the man, and they could give a damn about the party
or the woman,
or the woman.
Yep.
Correct. So we may have a totally new ball game here, and since we do, once again, the Democratic Party has to look around and determine whether or not they're going to get those Sanders supporters if Hillary gets the nomination. And if they don't get those Sanders supporters, they're going to lose. They're going to lose just as if he would have been running against her, because those supporters, they're out of it if their man or their woman is not in the race.
The point you made about the ball's in Hillary Clinton's court to earn the support. It shouldn't be automatic. It's not going to be, well, whether it should or it shouldn't means nothing.
The party thinks it should be automatic, but the people don't.
It's not going to be automatic.
No.
And she's going to have to do whatever she needs to do in order to earn those votes. Simple as that.
And
the burden's on her, not on us. The burden's not on Sanders supporters. The burden's on Clinton to show us that there's an overwhelming reason. And I'm not sure if vote for me because the other guy sucks worse than I do.
She can't do it, and
I'm not sure if that's a good enough reason to vote for somebody.
And she can't do it, and I'll tell you why she can't do it is because it's already been established that she can't be trusted. So even if she decides to purport a good portion of the Sanders agenda, how do we know that once she's in power, any of that stuff is going to stick? It probably won't.
You made the same point about Donald Trump, and I think you were right with that too. Donald Trump has been everywhere on every issue over the years. Nobody knows, and good friend of the show, Jon Stewart, aptly pointed out in an article, he said, this is what's wrong with Hillary Clinton's campaign. He said, meaning Jon Stewart, I don't know what she believes in. I just don't know where she stands on most every issue. Well, we know where she stands on some issues. We know where she stands on reproductive rights. There are some issues that we can trust her on implicitly.
She's essentially status quo.
Yeah, but in terms of economics, in terms of economic principles, and the things that affect us on a day-to-day basis, not the old hyperbole kind of stuff that the Democrats send out a fundraising letter and say, the Republican Karl Rove is going to destroy America. Oh, by the way, send us money. The Republicans send out that, Nancy Pelosi is going to destroy America. Oh, by the way, send us money. That kind of stuff, I don't think that washes anymore.
Not anymore. She's the consummate pragmatist. And unfortunately, an individual that simply sways with the times. All right.
So she and Trump are basically the two sort of kind of sides of the same problem. And this is perhaps why of all the 20 plus candidates going in, to this primary season. Republicans, I guess they had about 25 themselves, and Democrats had about 5 or 6 or something like that. Of all those candidates, the 2 candidates that were noted as being the least trustworthy candidates of all of those candidates, number 1, Trump, and number 2, Clinton. People don't know where they stand on issues, and people don't trust them. And I don't think it has anything to do with extraneous stuff like Trump's business dealings or Clinton's money, her getting money, her speaking fees, and all that other stuff. I don't think it has anything to do with that. I think it has to do with the people that they are underneath all the extraneous issues.
They can't be trusted. The interesting thing about Trump, all right, a political outsider,
yep,
corporate insider.
Yep, absolutely.
Hillary,
he represents Wall
political
Street.
insider,
Yep,
corporate insider.
Yep, he
Bernie
represents
Sanders,
Wall Street. Yeah,
Bernie Sanders, corporate outsider,
yep,
political outsider. It's important that we recognize that fact, because if you're an outsider politically and you're an outsider corporate, then you must be an insider for the people. Go.
So there you go. Hillary Clinton, earn our support or not. It's up to you. It's not up to us. It's up to you. We're going to keep talking till we fade off, but this has been Progressive Soup. I'm David Stevenson, Joe Niola, Luther Weeks, who being true to himself and true to his position in life is nonpartisan. Thank you for joining us. I guess we keep talking.
We got another 30 seconds. Still